Yank that shit up. See, that's the thing, man. These videos get you hypey, man. They get you hypey. I can't lie. I want to get in the gym right now and work out. Having an anabolic back day. All right.
What's up, y'all?
What's up, Natty Nation? It's your boys, Big Brank and Cromp. Today we're doing a reaction video, starting part of our new series over here. So we're gonna start recording us reacting to some other videos of fitness influencers in the industry, and you know, I'm gonna give our honest opinions. Maybe some of it's hoopla, maybe some of it's some real facts. So we're gonna start watching. I think what we're starting with today. Big Brank.
We're gonna see what this video is about. Dr. Mike about a study that says that creatine is dead.
Ineffectivo. That's what they're saying. They're saying this shit don't work. Not called bullshit already, but yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
All right.
Hey folks, Dr. Mike here for RP Strength, and today we're going to talk about a new study that came out that shows that creatine is not effective when combined with weight training to actually get you more jacked, and that all of the quote-unquote muscle or lean body mass that you gain from creatine seems to come only from the water that creatine brings in with it into the cell. Uh-oh, is creatine in trouble? Well, let's find out. Let's talk about the study. Break it.
All right. Real quick, when it comes to studies, you gotta be real careful with what you base all your knowledge off of. Some studies, obviously, there's a lot of bias out there. People could pay people to do things, to conduct the research. So what they'll do sometimes, they'll conduct the same study like many times over and over again if they need to. If you're willing to pay enough, they'll conduct the same study 100 times, and they'll find the one where the results are basically what they're looking for, and that's the one they'll publish. So they'll do stuff like that, some fishy things. You know, there could always be a little bit of, if your controls aren't correct, right? Like you could throw off a study as well. There's a lot of things you gotta be careful with. And so it's kind of important when you're like picking what studies to base your knowledge off of. For starters, you gotta use a little bit of common sense. Make sure that it makes sense the way they're conducting it. But two, you also wanna make sure, like, compare it to other studies that are conducted by other people, like other experts in the industry. So, you know, if a group of scientists are conducting the same research, find another group that are conducting similar research and see if the results differ and see why. Try to understand why the results might differ. Because, you know, not for nothing, but sometimes for a company, it's in their best interest for results to be skewed a certain way, right? They might release something saying that this supplement works amazingly, right? And maybe it does work, but maybe they exaggerate the results, and maybe they take people who are using other supplements to kind of boost or elevate the results of that research, right? And it's just to make it sound fluffier. It makes you a little more enticing. Oh yeah, that sounds amazing. I'm definitely gonna buy that and use it. And it's not to say that it's bad, but is it worth your penny, right? Because at the end of the day, you're looking at how effective that cost is. Is it really gonna be worth it to you and your wallet? Is it really necessary for you to invest in? Personally, creatine, I think it's worth the money. Other supplements out there, not really. There's a lot of supplements out there in the industry that are just not really worth the trouble. Like BCAAs, I mean, you know, they kind of work, but really not that effective. I mean, you're better off just getting a protein powder. It's cheaper, get a lot more of it for the same price, and actually way more effective. Anyways.
Get down, figure out the methods, the results, talk about what the conclusions are, and then compare it to the other studies that have been done about the subject to see where the truth really lies. So, new study came out about creatine. People, males and females, trained for 12 weeks, took 5 grams of creatine daily. This was a great study, measured muscle size pre and post. I'll link the study in the description and a bunch of references as well too if you want to read up to some of the other studies we'll be talking about today. And this is a really good study. So we're not dogging on the studies. It's seriously good work by the researchers, mostly from University of New South Wales in Sydney, Australia. Oi, yeah, nah, oh yeah. I have another word to say that starts with a C and ends with a UNT that they say in Australia all the time, but YouTube will kibosh us for that one. Great study design, very robust internal validity, and has important insights. So let's take a look at the basic design and findings before digging a little bit further. So the purpose of the study, the express purpose, was to examine whether creatine monohydrate, which is the most common and the most effective form of creatine, alone or combined with resistance training increases lean body mass beyond just water retention. The participants were 63 healthy adults, 34 females, 29 males, with an average age of 31 years, very applicable. I mean, this is a big study. In exercise science and sport science, 63 healthy adults is one hell of a sample size. We're going to be able to conclude a lot of really good stuff from such a massive sample size. The clarity with which we can see the world with 63 participants is a very, very high.
Yeah.
It was a randomized control trial, which is probably the most rigorous kind of study that there is. They compared 5 grams of creatine supplementation per day with no supplementation over 13 total weeks. That means each group got fake creatine or real creatine, did a week of consuming the fake creatine 5 grams per day or real creatine for 5 grams per day, 12 weeks of training, and got their lean body mass measured at the beginning, after 1 week, after the creatine loading phase was concluded, and at the end of that 12-week phase. So the measurement method to figure out how much muscle they were gaining was via DEXA, which is really, really, really insightful method. And also by, just DEXA. Yeah. At baseline, after the wash-in period, which is a week of taking creatine or fake creatine, and after that 12 weeks of resistance training. So 13 weeks total. The first week is just to get the creatine going. They found that the immediate effects after 7 days of consuming creatine was that the people that consumed creatine on average gained about a pound more muscle, quote unquote, than the control group that didn't have creatine. And that mainly indicates water-related changes because creatine does not grow a pound of muscle if you just start taking it. That's creatine bringing water into your cells.
So my little 2 cents on this, and I'm just taking a prediction here before Dr. Mike explains it, because he's probably going to explain a lot more detail than what I will. But the way creatine works is it does store a lot of water in your muscle bellies. So the size, the volume gained from creatine, it's not going to be muscular, you're not growing new muscle tissue. It's not happening. But what is happening when you're taking creatine is you're increasing your endurance. So you're able to hit a couple more reps. So your muscle endurance is going to go up. So in theory, right, like let's say if I was to do 225 on the bench press, and normally I can only get 5 reps. If I start taking creatine and I'm loaded with creatine, it has extra energy source to pull from. So now we go from those 5 reps, and maybe I get like good 7 or 8 reps in my training. And I don't think it takes a genius to understand that, doing an extra 3 reps in your training, that will result in the ability to build more muscle mass. Not you're gonna get more hypertrophy, right, with greater intensity. So it's not the fact that creatine itself is adding muscle mass, but it will improve your training methods to the point where you're going to have more efficient and effective training. And then that is going to allow you the ability to add more muscle mass.
Yeah, the way you look at it is, imagine you have a car and then you give it some nitrous, right? Imagine over a few years how many more miles the car traveled because of the nitrous, instead of having none. It's just like you get stronger just only because you're on it, but then you're gonna get stronger in the long run over years, like percentage wise, like a couple percent stronger, but it's better than not. Not to mention that when you take it, you can clearly feel that you're stronger and that you look bigger. So, a lot of these researchers that dive deep into this type of stuff, it's just to like pick it apart, but that don't mean that it's not good or not. It's just,
studies like this are still very important because you're really breaking down like the different aspects of this supplement, right? I mean, you gotta remember, creatine has so much research on it. I mean, it's probably the most researched supplement on the market. We know it works. I mean, it's not even really a question of whether or not it does or not. But Does it work the way that people think it does? Probably not, right? A lot of people, you know, they might think or have a lot of misconceptions involving or surrounding around creatine. So, you know, it's good that they are still conducting studies to kind of help our understanding improve. And it's really important. I mean, creatine is super, super effective. I mean, it's amazing the difference it makes to your training. It's great for all kinds of athletes too, like not just lifters, runners. A lot of people think that it's like bad when you're cutting weight. I would argue the opposite, because when you're cutting weight, you're gonna have less energy than you normally will. So it's great to have a supplement that helps you have a little more energy in the gym. So
far so good, very, very expected. What we would expect next, if creatine really is effective at helping you build muscle, is the group that weight trained with creatine would gain more muscle between week 1 and week 12 versus between week 0 and week 12, than the group that weight trained but didn't have any creatine. The resistance training phase occurred. Both the groups, the creatine and non-creatine group, gained roughly 4 pounds of lean mass, which is pretty dope for 12 weeks of training. And there was no significant difference between groups. Uh-oh. That means that the group that took creatine and trained didn't gain any more muscle than the group that didn't take creatine and trained. That is curious. If creatine actually...
That is interesting. Yeah, because if they gain the same amount of muscle mass, that implies that these people who were eating sugar had no difference. But I could say that a few issues you might see here is one, a placebo effect, which would basically say that creatine isn't as effective as we think it is. But sometimes even just thinking that something's helping you is enough for the brain to make it work.
I was out there, remember that as 30 something people on each side. You know, let's say one person had fucking like 6 or 7 muscle, like pounds of muscle instead of like only 4. Obviously it's going to average out still. If somebody had like 1 pound of muscle, somebody that, you know, might not. And I feel like there's a lot of variables, especially with this type of shit, bro. And it's real hard to say something like that. But
you're not staring at the study, it's kind of hard to know exactly how it's conducted. I mean, he says it was done pretty well. He is a doctor.
You got to remember that some people are like a no responder to creatine as it is. So imagine by chance every single person on the creatine side was a non-responder. You know, it might be crazy, but like that's what I'm saying. There's so many variables to conclude.
You also need to look at another thing you want to consider too is just like the maybe the experience of some of these people, right? Like there's a couple other factors that are really hard to control in studies. You know, what's your training experience, right? Like if I walked in and I'm like, hey, I'm ready to do this study, like I'm probably not going to add 4 pounds of muscle mass in 12 weeks.
Also,
you know
not to mention, anyone that has had like previous experience, even just a little bit, and you lose that couple pounds of muscle that you got,
come and get it back
within a few weeks. You could be, you know, you could be benching like 135 pounds for a few reps, and then you give it like a month or two, and you're benching back, you know, above 200 easily. Like if you're already strong, you know.
And even more so, you know, some of these people may have never been athletes, and the same thing could be applied, right? Like if they have like that beginner gains kind of effect going on, maybe they're starting off, and you'll see that they might start off with like very little muscle, and 4 pounds to them is easy to put on at that point. So you see what I mean? Like there's a lot of things you got to take into consideration. And then we're talking about healthy adults, right? And the problem is when you have healthy adults, well, typically they're healthy for a reason. They're probably fit, probably staying active. So, you know, it's kind of hard to say that a good amount of them may have already been doing resistance training. So we don't know if that may have thrown off the results a little bit. Now let's see what else he has
actually
to say.
Affected muscle growth. You would think it would boost training results, but in this study, it did not. Females had a little bit of a bigger lean mass increase from the creatine wash-in. A lot of times females actually respond a little bit better to creatine because females typically tend to undereat protein and undereat meat compared to males. Sometimes they have a bigger response in some studies to creatine. It's such a small amount that I wouldn't say this is something to run home to, but neither sex showed.
Yeah, I think what he's saying here is that, or he's implying is that typically, you know, they're lacking in the creatine that they would receive from the meat. That males probably receive more of because we probably eat a lot more protein.
Just giving them a smaller boost on top of the, you know,
it's like
regular gains.
Not only did you not have, you know, this boost, but you were actually deficient. So, you know, it's like going to seem like a more exaggerated result that you're receiving.
Significant lean mass gains over the course of the 12 weeks of training if they took creatine versus if they didn't. Not great. So the conclusion of the study by the study authors was that creatine's initial lean mass increase is almost certainly likely due to water retention. That's not contentious. And that creatine in this study did not enhance muscle gain beyond its initial water bloating effect. So that the people who used creatine to help them lift weights didn't get any more jacked, taking in 5 grams of creatine per day, which is the standard dose, it's the dose I take, than the folks that didn't. And the author's implication here was that maybe a higher creatine maintenance dose that during the 12 weeks, more than 5 grams a day, might be necessary for creatine to show additional true hypertrophy. But this is kind of an interesting conclusion to me. Most studies show that 5 grams is more than good enough. Many studies show that 2 to 3 grams of creatine can detectably enhance muscle hypertrophy. So what the hell is going on here, right? So we have to be open-minded and think, okay, maybe the muscle, quote unquote, that people gain on creatine when they think they're gaining is really just body water. And some of it definitely is. But this study, just by itself, concludes that all of it is. And for this study, that's definitely true. That's what seemed to have been happening. But before we conclude this video and say, hey, listen, creatine has been refuted, I'm sure you've seen a bunch of memes and infographics by now that, no, creatine doesn't work. Science works never, ever, ever one study at a time. Science builds its understanding of the world by taking lots and lots of studies and putting them together, zooming out and saying, what is the overall message we're getting from these studies? Let me give you an example in the real world with almost no science whatsoever. Let's say you have a friend that you think is super funny and super cool. And you have another friend that you think is super awkward and kind of weird. You love him, but he's not for public consumption. Maybe you are biased. You're just vibing weird. Maybe you're the weird one, and the friend that you think is cool and funny really isn't, and the friend that you think is awkward and strange really isn't, and they're roughly kind of the same effect on people that they meet. If I gave you a situation where we had both friends separately meet with a person who never saw them before, and then afterwards we asked the person, hey, which one was funny/cool and which one was kind of weird? Whatever that one person says, how much faith do we put in to their answer being like the actual truth that pretty much everyone will agree with? Come on, one person. I mean, the person you pick could just be a wacky, strange, no offense, Dungeons and Dragons playing ass moth. And then they'll be like, yeah, I really like the weird friend. He was the cool one to me. And you're like, oh, that's not true. That's wrong. What if you had someone who's a real bro and real like vibes person? They like the chill cool guy and they hate the real nerd guy, but maybe that's not representative. Not everyone's a bro. So how do you really parse that problem? That right there is one study at a time. How do you?
Yeah, you gotta be real careful with like even confirmation bias, right? So like we all know the creatine works, right? So it's like you're already kind of in your own head convincing yourself that it works, even if maybe something says that it doesn't. You're like, bullshit, right? But that's not necessarily true. You know what I mean? Like we don't know 100% of everything. Science isn't certain. There's no such thing as a real fact. It's all just evidence-based, and you're just constantly writing over the same thing. You conducting the same experiments. I mean, there's been things that have been known to work and been proven for many, many decades, whatever, and then we find out, oh, that was wrong. Oh, that was wrong. Yeah, guess what, guys? We were wrong again. So, you know what I mean? Like, that's just how science works. You never really know for sure. So it is possible. Maybe creatine doesn't work the way that we thought, or maybe it doesn't work at all. Do I think that's necessarily true? No. I mean, I would still side with the side of many research studies that are conducted. We're probably going to outweigh this one, but this will shine some light, and it probably will turn a lot of heads, and a lot of people might start conducting more studies to see if maybe there's some truth to this. So we'll see what
you
happens.
Really solve that problem. Over time, you have 100 people, at least 10 people, for the love of God, meet your two friends and tell you afterwards, hey, which one was cool and which one was weird. Look, if you meet 100 people and most of them say you're chill and funny, you're probably chill and funny. If you meet 100 people and most of them say you're kind of weird, you're probably kind of weird. But it's those multiple interactions that really build a big picture. One examination at a time could just be chance. It could be mismeasurement. It could be that the person you're asking, hey, how was my friend? They're actually thinking about their exam they have later that day, and they're like, yeah, that one was chill. He was funny. He was cool. Yep, I gotta go. And you're like, oh, okay.
Speaking of studies, There's a study. Apparently, nicotine boosts your testosterone.
Yes, that's what it is. It's like they didn't even think it through. That's just error.
The video.
So that's how
Don't
science
listen to
works.
him.
So if you see anyone study
Please
at a
don't start
time,
smoking, 'cause
we
it-
can't be too sure that
that's
they really discovered the
terrible.
truth or that it was just strange
Gives you
finding.
cancer.
Statistical error is 100% possible. Our understanding of visibility to reality is fuzzy. But if we do it over and over and over and over, then after a while we're like, yeah, man, that really is a thing. Another quick analogy is one of sports. You have two people who play basketball. How do you find out who's better at basketball? Do you have them play one game? I mean, people get lucky. The guy can sprain his ankle. The guy can have an off day.
Yeah.
One game doesn't tell you a lot.
Get your games in the
But if you have
picture,
people
and
play
I'll get my
10 games
in the
against each
picture,
other,
man.
Me.
10 games
You
to
got your
7
games
points
in
or
the
something
picture,
like
huh?
that,
Yeah.
and one
I
guy
got no
wins
games
8
in the
games and
picture. I
loses
look
2,
no games.
I look small.
probably
You
the
look
better
small.
basketball
I look
player.
small.
So what we're going to do now
Bad day for
is we're
Frank.
going to look
You look small.
at
I'm in
the
recovery.
huge body of evidence,
Healed
kind of
up.
a total body of the evidence we've collected over literally decades about
Ready to
creatine,
go.
to ask 2 questions
starts
about
tomorrow.
creatine
You're not
to
even
see
recovered.
if they agree or
I'm
disagree
all
with this
recovered,
study.
Max.
Here are
I'm
2
sure
questions.
You missed.
Dr. Mike talking a lot of hoopla. No, I'm kidding.
He is talking a whole bunch of hoopla, to be honest.
He's saying the same simple thing 10 times.
Yeah.